everyone, welcome to episode 54 of Dollar Dialogue, Algorithms versus Inflation. Today we're looking at Nigeria's high stakes AI gamble. So there is a little bit of gambling involved, though Dollar Dialogue does not endorse gambling, rather in the economic sense of AI versus inflation. So today for our very interesting episode, we have Mr. Zohran Rahman, who is currently a junior at AISD, and he is an extremely talented young individual when it comes to economics. In fact, he is currently a participant of the Wharton Global Youth Finance Program of our school. So he's not only very adept at economics, but also at finance and political science as well, as he's also part of our senior MUN team. So, Mr. Zohran Rahman, is there anything else that you would like to add to the introduction of Dollar Dialogue, as this will be, I believe, your second time in this podcast?
No, nothing to add, but I'm really honored to be here a second time. Last time I had a lot of fun, and I hope to have that again today.
Thank you, Mr. Zohran Rahman, for that introduction. So to move into the first segment of the podcast, it's important to first talk about inflation. So in economics, inflation is a rise in like an increase in the average price level. So we usually do that by showing the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, which is basically the same as supply and demand, but aggregate means like the whole economy. And in the x-axis we have like real GDP, and in the y-axis we have like price level. So an increase in price level is basically inflation, and a decrease will be deflation. As for Nigeria, Nigeria today is battling one of the most severe inflationary episodes in its modern history, and the effects are being felt in every corner of society, from the bustling markets of Lagos to the farmlands of Kano. So inflation recently topped 30% year on year, with food inflation spiking even higher, crossing 35% in 2025. So for ordinary Nigerians, this means that a bag of rice, the country's staple grain, now costs nearly double what it did just 2 years ago, while the price of gari, which is like a cassava flour, and cooking oil has risen beyond the reach of many low-income households. At the heart of this crisis is the weak naira. Following multiple devaluations by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the naira has lost more than half its value against the US dollar in the past 2 years. And because Nigeria relies heavily on imports for essentials such as fuel, wheat, sugar, and even fertilizer, this depreciation feeds directly into consumer prices. In 2023, for instance, Nigeria spent over $3.3 billion importing wheat, even though local production fell short of demand. So each naira devaluation makes imports costlier, driving inflation higher. And this inflationary spiral is a classic economic logic. And the reason for that is because Nigeria is caught in what we call, and this is what Mr. Spivey has taught us as well, it's a cost push inflation cycle, where rising production costs and import costs are passed on to consumers. So when the exchange rate weakens, it not only raises the cost of imported goods, but also fuels higher transport and logistic expenses, since petroleum products are still partly imported despite Nigeria being an oil producer. So as petrol prices climb, so do the cost of moving food and goods around the country. And therefore, we can see that supply chains are already strained by poor infrastructure. And this impact is not abstract. It actually hits Nigerians daily. At YYGS, this summer, I was able to meet with two Nigerian roommates, Mr. Kaido and Mr. Praise Gate, who are both from Lagos, and they shared insights. For example, in Lagos, they told me that street vendors, for example, selling suya or akara, complain that their margins are being squeezed as beef and vegetable oil prices surge, and many are forced to shrink portion sizes to keep customers. In Kano, for example, smallholder farmers face a cruel irony. They sell maize or millet at higher prices, but because input costs like fertilizer and fuel have risen even faster, they end up with little real income gain. And for urban workers, transport fares on Dan for minibuses or motorcycle taxis absorb a rising share of wages, leaving less for rent and food. As a result, economists note that Nigeria's inflation has structural as well as cyclical causes. A structural inflation framework highlights the bottlenecks in agriculture, energy, and logistics. And despite employing more than 70% of the labor force, agriculture remains rain-fed and vulnerable to climate shocks. Poor storage means up to 40% of harvested crops are lost before reaching market, artificially constraining supply and driving up prices. And meanwhile, electricity shortages and reliance on expensive diesel generators increase costs for manufacturers, discouraging investment and adding further to inflationary pressures. So with that being said, we have seen that Nigeria is currently facing a cost push inflation, and therefore it makes it very difficult for the country to come out of this inflationary spiral, as they're importing petroleum products, but with each import, the average price level or inflation keeps on going. So it is a cycle. So therefore, Mr. Shazib Karim, Mr. Zohran Rahman, or Mr. Supri Nagal, is there anything else that you would like to add to the introduction of Nigeria's fire? Mr. Supri Nagal, I see that your hand is raised.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you've already talked about inflation. It's a major problem, and we know food inflation is huge, and food is one of our necessities. So that means that insecurity in farming regions, poor logistics, and heavy dependence on imports would push food prices up by a lot. And then there's also fuel and energy. You already mentioned petroleum costs have increased substantially. But then AI can come in and the algorithms could possibly fight inflation as well. Because number one, AI can process millions of data points from market food prices to mobile money transactions, like you just mentioned as well, in real time. This means it would be easier to make smarter policy decisions. Like, imagine the central bank getting early warning signals about inflation instead of reacting months later after the worst has already passed. So, that would mean interest rate and forex decisions could be a lot smarter and faster. And then food and agriculture, there are so many new revolutionary AI powered tools that can help farmers predict weather patterns, detect crop diseases, and optimize irrigation. And this would obviously lead to higher yields and fewer crop losses, which would then, as a result, mean cheaper food in the markets. And that would tackle one of the biggest drivers of inflation, or more specifically, food inflation. Then we also have logistics and transportation. Because think about how much money is wasted moving foods across Nigeria. Nigeria is an extremely populous country, and AI algorithms can optimize these delivery routes by cutting fuel costs and reducing waste. This would make goods even cheaper for businesses and consumers, again, uh, striking striking a tough blow at inflation. Then we also have currency and forex. The black market exchange rate often drives inflation. AI could track these abnormal forex trades, flag fraud, and improve transparency. This would also mean corruption in the government would have to reduce in order to stabilize the naira, which in turn helps stabilize prices. And we also know about subsidy leaks, inflated contracts, and ghost payments, all done by the corrupt government. So, what can the people do? As you've seen recently in the news, Nepal had a major revolutionary outthrown government, and so did Bangladesh, so did Sri Lanka, so did Indonesia. I'm not trying to promote violence or anything like this, but I'm just trying to underscore the fact that the people have to stand up to the government and try to reduce corruption, try to have a regime change in a very peaceful manner, of course. Then there's also the challenges with AI, because AI in Nigeria could face serious challenges. Number one, data availability. Because there are too many transactions made cash based in Nigeria, it's obviously impossible for AI to track cash based transactions. And then there's also infrastructure. There's the power in Nigeria is very unstable, and internet access is actually limited. I believe not only like 70-60% of six is the internet penetration in Nigeria. And then there's also policy resistance, because AI reduces human manipulation, which not everyone in power may welcome, especially anyone corrupt in the government. And of course, there's inequality. Big firms may adopt AI first, spending thousands and thousands of dollars, and this would obviously leave small businesses struggling to catch up. So, I have a question for you, Zoran. What do you think about all of this? And do you think AI could actually help tackle inflation in Nigeria?
Can you hear me, chat? My mic might be a bit muffled right now.
It's all good, Zoran. Continue, please. Thank you so much.
Okay, so as you said, Supreet, I feel like you covered it up really well. And you asked me like, do I think AI could help inflation in Nigeria, right?
Yes.
Um, well, there are different sub factors that I believe AI could be like helpful with. So number one, it could like optimize crop field predictions and like guide farmers, and like it could also be used for like harvesting using weather and soil data. And it could like one idea I think it could use is smart pricing platforms. Could like they could help stabilize the markets by like linking farmers to consumers, and then like that could bypass middlemen who drive up prices. And additionally, one thing that I also think is pretty that could be helpful with AI is reduce post-harvest losses using AI powered supply chain monitoring. So like just tracking storage, transport, and distribution. And in terms of the exchange rate and like just the monetary policy, the central bank of Nigeria could use like forecasting models using AI to like predict inflations or like exchange rate fluctuations and just capital flows in general. And as for the fraud and leakages, I feel like AI can detect corruption, fraud, smuggling, especially with fuel products across borders. But the challenges are, obviously due to the poor digital infrastructure, lack of high quality data to AI streams. So it might be a while before we see this implemented in Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Zohran Rahman, for that very insightful response. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Mr. Shazib Karim, I see that your hand is raised. Would you also like to chime in?
Mr. Shazak Karim, I can't hear you. Could you please speak? Or are you facing any internet issues?
I believe Mr. Shazib Karim has said in the chat that he's currently facing internet difficulties. So we'll continue. So I would like just to add on to Zoran and Supreet. I would say the inflation in Nigeria is a real issue, which is obviously an economic burden. However, I would also say like there has to be monetary policy responses as well that has to be involved. And so far, I would say they have delivered limited relief. The Central Bank of Nigeria, for example, has raised interest rates to nearly 26%, among the highest in Africa. And this aims to curb demand and stabilize the naira, but it also restricts credit for small businesses, which form the backbone of Nigerian economy. And the government's removal of fuel subsidies in 2023, while necessary to reduce fiscal deficits, also triggered a sharp one-time increase in transport and living costs, amplifying inflationary pressure in the short run. So my extended essay in economics under Mr. Spivey's guidance was also regarding a little bit about the monetary policy of the central bank of Bangladesh, and also and the case of Nigeria is actually contrary to Bangladesh, as in Bangladesh, the central bank actually devalued the currency of taka. So taka was around 86 taka for 1 USD back in like 2021, and now it's like around 123 taka per USD. And the reason for that was to incentivize more garments export, as a cheaper taka basically means it's easier for to foreigners to buy Bangladeshi garments at a cheaper rate. However, for Nigeria, by increasing interest rates, what they're essentially doing is they're trying to stabilize the naira by making it stronger, but it comes at the cost of credit for small businesses. And therefore, this is an economic burden not only on businesses but also on the poor, who spend a disproportionate amount of income on their food. And the reason for that is in a research I found that according to the National Bureau of Statistics, food accounts for over 50% of household consumption expenditure in Nigeria. Therefore, when food inflation, which is the primary cause of inflation in Nigeria, surges beyond 35%, poverty not only deepens but malnutrition rises and social unrest becomes more likely. And indeed, there was a rising bread prices contributing to a protest in Abuja and Lagos in early 2024, which sort of underscores how inflation is not just an economic issue but also a political flashpoint. And for Nigeria, the inflation higher is both a symptom and a signal. It reflects underlying vulnerabilities, import dependence, weak infrastructure, and policy trade off, while signaling the urgent need for structural reforms. And stabilizing the naira, the diversifying the economy, and investing in local agriculture are crucial steps. Until then, the squeeze on ordinary Nigerians will remain severe, with inflation dictating not just economic policy debates, but also the rhythm of daily survival. So, with that being said, to move on to the next segment of the podcast, which is regarding where agriculture meets AI. And this is really the nucleus of today's episode. And this is also interesting as we wouldn't think AI would be seen in a country like Nigeria. However, Nigeria is actually quite a rich country in Africa. In fact, it has the richest GDP in Africa. And it used to be even, it could possibly even become the UAE of Africa if it wasn't for the rampant corruption. So, to move on to the second segment where agriculture meets AI, I think it's important to understand that agriculture remains the backbone of majority of the developing countries around the world, and it's the same for Nigeria. It employs 70% of the labor workforce and contributes, however, it does contribute a little less, which is around 23% of GDP. And the reason for that is because agriculture is not just as productive. Yet, despite this scale, the sector has long struggled with inefficiencies, low yields, and vulnerability to climate shocks. And this is where artificial intelligence enters. From drought forecasting to pest monitoring and soil analysis, AI driven technologies are being hailed as tools that could help Nigeria unlock its vast agricultural potential, reduce inflation, and create greater resilience in the face of climate change. And the promise of AI in Nigerian fields is also something that must be mentioned. Take drought forecasting models, for instance. Nigeria's northern states, from Kano to Borno, are increasingly vulnerable to erratic rainfall due to climate change. AI-based weather prediction tools, which process satellite imagery and climate data, can help farmers decide where to plant maize, millet, or cassava to maximize yields. And in a country where less than 7% of farmland is irrigated, the timing of rainfall can determine whether a harvest succeeds or fails. AI could narrow that uncertainty. Pest monitoring is another promising application. Nigeria loses an estimated $9 billion annually to crop pests and diseases, including the notorious fall armyworm that devastates maize fields. AI-enabled mobile apps, which allow farmers to upload images of diseased crops, receive real-time diagnoses, are being piloted by agri-tech startups in Kaduna and Katsina. And these tools are not only to help farmers identify threats early, but also to reduce over-reliance on costly pesticides, improving both profitability and sustainability. Additionally, soil analysis powered by AI is equally transformative. In many parts of Nigeria, farmers apply fertilizers blindly without knowing whether their soils are nitrogen deficient or saline. And companies like Hello Tractor and Thrive Argic are also experimenting with AI-linked soil sensors and drones to map nutrient levels. And when optimized, it could significantly raise cassava, yam yields, crops, which are essentially transforming the caloric foundation for millions of Nigerian households. And briefly, I would also like to talk about the success stories and pilot programs. And this is what many of my friends at YYGS also mentioned. So, one emerging success story lies in northern Nigeria, where startups are piloting precision farming. So, platforms that connect farmers with drone imagery combined with AI recommendations on planting density and irrigation scheduling have reported improvement. Yield improvements of around 20 to 30%. In the Kaduna state, for example, an AI enabled system helped cooperative maize farmers adjust planting dates, cutting crop losses during an unusually dry season in 2024. And there is also Hello Tractor, which has been dubbed Uber for tractors, is integrating AI into its platform to allocate machinery across rural communities, which also reduces idle time and ensures that smallholder farmers gain affordable access to mechanization. And these early signs of process suggest that Nigeria could leapfrog traditional agricultural transition and harness data-driven farming directly. And for a small country that still spends billions importing staples like wheat and rice, raising local productivity with AI has clear macroeconomic benefits, which is reducing import bills, a stronger naira, and less pressure on inflation. And here is a challenge, and I think Mr. Zohran, Rahman, Mr. Shazim Karim, Mr. Supri Nagala, you could also chime in here. What is the biggest challenge here? And the challenge of AI in farming is that who benefits? Large commercial farms around Abuja or Ogun can afford AI-enabled sensors, drones, or data platforms. Smallholder farmers in Sokoto or Bauchi uh, who till 2 or 3 hectares by hand often cannot. So therefore, there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is the AI often benefits the rich, not the rich, but large commercially profitable farms, while individual farmers are often left behind. So I see Mr. Supit Nagala, your hand is raised. Would you like to chime in?
Yes, please. Thank you, my friend. And such a detailed and very insightful explanation from you. So, first, we know, like you underscored, food inflation is the biggest driver of Nigeria's rising prices. And we also know that Nigeria actually has a land and a people to feed itself. But farmers, as you explained, face huge challenges. They can't predict weather patterns, crops get hit by pests and diseases, transport and storage are inefficient, and most farmers work with very little capital. And that last line is very important. Farmers work with very little capital. So, all of this would mean that less food is produced, more losses along the way, and higher prices in the market. That's how food inflation eats into everyone's pockets. So, like you said, the app was a beautiful idea, because imagine a farmer in Kaduna with just a smartphone, and she could just take a picture of a diseased leaf by using an AI app that could diagnose it instantly and suggest treatment. And then AI driven weather models could also predict rainfall, uh, so she knows when to plant or harvest. AI powered logistics platforms match her with the cheapest transport route to get her crops to Lagos before they rot. And the result would be higher yields, less waste, and cheaper food in the market. But the thing is, if millions of farmers do get this kind of support, AI support, Nigeria will produce more food locally. However, the problem is, how will we actually make this happen? How is this feasible? Because farming needs a lot of money. Seeds, fertilizers, equipment, they're a lot of cost. And most farmers in Nigeria don't have access to traditional bank loans, because banks see farmers as too risky with no credit history or collateral. So farmers are forced to stick and stay in the rat cycle of borrowing from informal lenders at crazy interest rates. And that forces them to raise their prices, which again fuels inflation. So, although you mentioned how AI could be used as in the form of an app, I believe AI could be used in the with uh with an interplay of microfinance, because AI could easily change the story. Instead of judging farmers by collateral, the AI could analyze satellite images of farmland, past yields, and even mobile money transaction patterns to build a real picture of credit worthiness of the farmers, and then provide them with microfinance. So this would mean microfinance institutions could give farmers fairer, cheaper loans with more confidence, again, which would reduce food inflation. Now let's go to the bigger picture. Let's connect the dots. AI helps farmers grow more and waste less. AI helps microfinance institutions lend smarter and cheaper. Together, they attack the root causes of food inflation. However, Zoran, I have a big question for you. Let's get practical here. Imagine a farmer in Kaduna or Kano who has no access to a traditional bank loan, struggling with pests, and loses half his harvest before it even reaches Lagos. So, if you had to design one AI solution that could directly help that farmer lower costs, what would it look like, and how realistic is it for the common man in Nigeria?
Well, you painted me. Wait, can you hear me? So you painted me like a tricky question, but I feel like there could be a workaround to help with the transportation of the food. So number one, I feel like um, there could be like a. Let me think. Okay, could you rephrase the last part of the question? So, please, like, how could the AI help with what?
Directly help the farmer in lowering costs and fight inflation? And how would it look like, and how realistic is it for the common man in Nigeria today?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood your question originally. So, for lowering cost, then I feel like one thing that could be used is loan repayment linked to harvest. Like AI can predict when the harvest season will bring income, which would be a big
Wait, but
like.
to add on to that, Zoran, I just wanted to also inform you only 39% of the population in Nigeria have internet penetration.
Yeah, you bring a good point to the argument, Supreme. I feel like it'd be pretty unfeasible, like for for the farmer to just have access with AI out of the blue. But that like if but your question was if they were to have it, right? If they were to have access to it.
No, how would we do it? Because in the we don't have it now. So how would AI help? Because we only
Oh,
39 have internet. So how would AI be able to help?
then if there was no access to internet, then I don't think a big impact would have been able to be made up with
Mm,
that. However, however, like there could be like some um, there could be like some contracts to it, I believe. Like, what about training programs or just investing in basic infrastructure or even reaching out for government or NGO help to ensure that AI solutions get taught around, which could also tie to the training programs. And like, if it, but this, reaching out to the government is more like helping for like just for the access of AI, not on like directly what your question is asking.
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Zoran. And Ari, do you have any answers to this question as well? Because how will AI have a real impact when only 39% have internet?
That's a very fair question, Supreme. That I would wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think the feasibility of AI is a potential problem in Nigeria. And I would say maybe the nucleus of the question is that let's look at the stats first. And I would say like Nigeria's digital infrastructure is actually growing because Nigeria has over 122 million internet users according to the NCC 2024, making it Africa's largest digital market. And smartphone penetration is also rising, particularly in urban and peri-urban areas. However, and there's also it's also providing the foundation for the AI-powered apps that we are talking about, like pest monitoring, weather forecasting, to reach to farmers at scale. And there are existing fintech and agri-tech ecosystems. For example, Nigeria is already a continental leader in fintech. For example, Flutterwave, Paystack, and OPay are digital platforms that can scale rapidly. In agriculture, for example, Hello Tractor, Trivagic, and Crop2Cash are piloting AI programs from drone to imagery. And the government, the central bank, has actually Anchor Borrowers Program, and international partners like World Bank are also funding digital infrastructure project. And and however, the problem, as you mentioned, is that only 39% of the civilians that have internet access. And I would say one of the ways they could mitigate that is through their youth demographic. Over 60% of Nigerians are under 25, and many of them are actually digital savvy and could be trained in data labeling, drone operation, and AI maintenance. Nigeria often has this bad reputation of being of young individuals engaging in scam activities. However, if they pivoted from that to AI powered startups in agriculture, the country could actually see benefits. And in the short run, I would say AI cannot help. That's economically it's not good to be absolute. However, we can be absolute here, as in the short run the infrastructure is just lacking. However, I would say in the medium and long term, like in 5 years or even in 10 years, with the help of the central bank's Anchors Borrowers Program and international partners like World Bank, even USAID, IFAD, the digital infrastructure in Nigeria would actually uh, see much more promise. Would you agree with that, Mr. Supri Nagala, Mr. Shazif Krabi, or Mr. Zoran Rahman?
I would agree with that statement.
Mr. Shazif Krabi, I see that your hand is. No, sorry, Mr. Supri Nagala, I see that your hand is raised.
Oh yes, it was beautifully explained, and I really get what you're saying. Because yes, like you also mentioned, 30% of Nigerians actually have access to internet. But at the same time, you have to realize by population, by numbers, quantity, Nigeria has the seventh most uh, is the seventh largest country by people, by the number of people who have access to the internet. So that means they have, like you mentioned, 120 million internet users, which is the seventh most in the world. So obviously, even if it's not a high percentage, this this number is good enough to actually revolutionize agriculture with the help of AI. And also, Shazib, could you do you have any thoughts on this?
Apologies, viewers. It seems that Mr. Shazid Karim is currently driving through a desert storm in Dubai, which is why his internet is lacking. However, Mr. Shazib Karim has written a paragraph in the chat that I would actually is is very insightful, and he said that the feasibility of AI in Nigeria's agriculture is high because the digital-based entrepreneurial ecosystem and the youth demographics are already aligned. So therefore, the pros outweigh the cons in the sense that the pros, including higher yields, reduced inflation, climate resilience, and financial inclusion, make Nigeria a transformative country for agriculture scaled inclusively. And I would actually wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Shazia Karim here, because currently AI-enabled startups are piloting precision farming in northern Nigeria. However, will smallholder farmers who make up 70% of the workforce get access is a large issue. However, if they were to get access in the medium term, this would actually position Nigeria very ahead and very forward, as well as their country is actually very naturally resource rich. They have oil, however, it's being misutilized in the sense that a large part of it is gone to high ranking officials, and therefore, if mitigated, this would also help Nigeria's GDP grow even faster. Now, let's talk about another segment of the podcast, which is the jobs and the youth question. And to give some preface into this, in South Asia, for example, yeah, I think the dots are starting to connect now. South Asia, first Sri Lanka had a youth-led revolution. This was followed by Bangladesh last year. I was unfortunately out of the country, but I did see on the news that the Bangladeshi youth, for example, due to quota-led protests, led a Gen Z revolution. Same happened in Sri Lanka. However, it was a little less Gen Z, and in Nepal, the whole thing that happened like in September 2025, the whole thing was a Gen Z revolution. So therefore, we can see that the
And
reason.
Indonesia, of course.
Yes, Mr. Supinala, would you like to add something?
No. I just wanted to mention Indonesia, of course, because there was also a medium revolution in Indonesia where they overthrew the government, and yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Subinangala. Yes, Indonesia as well. So in South Asia, we're seeing this Gen Z revolution, and in economic class, we were talking about how this is actually a reflection of youth unemployment, which is much more than anything. Therefore, we can see that how economic activities affect political scene in countries as well, and in Nigeria as well. This might be the case. And the reason, and I do not say this lightly, because and talking with other Nigerians as well, I realize Nigeria is a young country. Over 60% of its 220 million population are under 25, making it home to one of the world's largest youth populations. In theory, this youth bulge is a demographic dividend, a large, energetic workforce capable of powering growth for decades. But in practice, the dividend risks turning into a demographic bomb. Youth unemployment in Nigeria is among the highest in Africa. Official figures hover around 13 to 15%, but underemployment, informal labor, and discouraged workers, which are also not part of the official unemployment rate of a country, and this is more macroeconomics. But these push the real rate much higher. Therefore, for millions of young Nigerians, economic opportunity feels like a promise deferred, and therefore people are increasingly starting to get fed up with it. And the risk is displacement in the age of AI. Artificial intelligence adds a new wrinkle to this picture. Many of the jobs accessible to young people entering the workforce, for example, call centers, clerical data entry, routine administrative tasks, are precisely the ones most vulnerable to automation. AI chatbots can handle customer queries more cheaply than a Nigerian call center agent, while software can process invoices and spreadsheets in seconds. For young workers with limited formal education, these were once entry-level positions that offered a foothold into the labor market. And as AI displaces them, particularly in cities like Lagos and Abuja, where companies actually prefer that as it's much cheaper to use AI than hire somebody. The risk is that large cohorts of Nigerian youth will be unemployed, and they will be excluded from the formal economy, feeding into frustration, mitigating pressures, and even insecurity. And economically, this reflects the phenomenon of structural unemployment, where available worker skills do not match the demands of modern economy. So, unless Nigeria invests in reskilling, specializing its workforce, AI adoption could deepen inequality by creating high-tech jobs for a few while stripping away low-skill opportunities for a many. And with that being said, Mr. Supri Naila, Mr. Shazib Karim, or Mr. Zoran Rahman, would you also share similar sentiment, or what do you think is a potential problem for Nigeria, given this high youth unemployment rate, and given that AI might take over the jobs that youth would have potentially secured?
Hey,
Mr.
could you
Zoran
please?
Rahman, oh sorry, Mr. Supri Nagal, I see that you had this raise.
Yeah, could you please repeat the question? My internet was breaking as well.
Yes, Mr. Subir Nagala. So as I was saying, what do you guys think is a will be a potential concern for Nigeria, Nigerian economy, or even Nigerian politics, given that youth unemployment in Nigeria is rising at a rapid rate? If I'm not mistaken, over 60% of the population are under 25. However, the youth unemployment rate officially is 15%, but it's much more likely to be around 25 or even 30%. Therefore, do you guys and given that AI is now displacing jobs that the youth would have potentially secured in these sectors, what do you think will be potential repercussions of the Nigerian economy? Do you even foresee a revolution, perhaps? What are you guys' opinions on it?
Yeah, okay. So actually, that would mean around 1 in 9 or 1 in 8 people you meet in Nigeria are unemployed, and this is or and then most of them are also stuck in vulnerable informal jobs, and that's also very frightening in this nation, because when the youth doesn't have stable jobs, it would create a cycle because they can't spend, which would then slow down the economy. And the lack of opportunities also fuels brain drain, as money would leave Nigeria for jobs abroad. And some also argue that even if inflation is fixed, without stabilizing agriculture and microfinance, we would still be leaving behind the next generation of workers. So, Zoran, I have a big question for you. How do we make sure that Nigeria's economic policies, with while lining up to AI, not only fights inflation but also creates real sustainable opportunities for young people?
Wait, sorry, Supreet, your mic was a bit muffly for me. My internet's not like. Could you repeat that?
No problem, of course, my friend. So, how do we make sure that Nigeria's economic policies not only fight inflation but also create real sustainable opportunities for young people while also keeping artificial intelligence in mind?
Okay, so so there's ways to combat this question. Okay, but it's also like a crucial point that must be brought. AI can't just AI can't just fight inflation to benefit Nigeria's youth and like long-term growth. Economic policies must align with like the utilization AI to like be used efficiently. And so number one that I think could be done is investing in human capital for like training young people in AI, coding, data analysis, and agri-tech. Like how I brought up the training programs a bit earlier. So this could be the utilization of them, as well as just creating like supporting entrepreneurship. Like an example could be youth-led AI startups, similar to like a lot like AISD implements a lot of youth-led stuff, so just implementing it in schools there could like give people a boost, as well as just like creating incubators and accelerators for them. And one thing that could be pretty important is the policy and regulatory framework. like data governance and transparency, like ensuring AI systems are all accountable. So, like to protect users, because in certain cases, people can get scammed and like buy the wrong AI, or just like sell some data which you probably wouldn't want out there. And uh, also just incentives for innovation, like tax breaks for AI startups and companies employing young workers. And in the bottom line, I just believe that target AI investments towards sectors that employ youth, and making regulations transparent and inclusive, and using AI for proactive economic planning, not just reactive inflation control. So it can encourage a collaboration between the government, the private sector, and the communities. And overall, just like just looking over how um, AI can just like training and empowering the young people. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Zohran, for that very insightful response. I think that what you mentioned is truly an innovative solution. And I would also agree that yeah, the AI should penetrate sectors which helps youth, that helps with youth employment. And lastly, to move on to the final segment of podcast today, I think it is crucial. Firstly, before moving on to that, I would say, just to elucidate a bit more on the opportunities, I would say AI actually creates opportunities if Nigeria can seize them. One clear growth area is the digital work itself. Global tech companies increasingly rely on outsourced labor for AI data labeling, where humans tag images, transcribe audio, or verify outputs to train algorithms. And Nigeria, with its English-speaking youth base, is already participating in this global micro work economy. While such works are low paying by international standards, they can provide income streams and entry points into digital skills. And more importantly, coding and software development remain in high demand. The Lagos Tech Hub is often dubbed the Silicon Lagoon, is home to startups like Flutterwave, Paystack, and Andela. So these firms have proven Nigerian youth can compete globally in software, fintech, and AI applications. Andela, in particular, has trained and exported thousands of Nigerian developers to work for international firms. So expanding such models could turn Nigeria's youth bulge into a digital talent engine. Governments are also experimenting with AI legacy programs. For example, initiatives to introduce Python, machine learning, and robotics into secondary and tertiary curricula have begun, though coverage remains patchy. And the feasibility challenge is scaling these efforts from elite schools in Lagos and Abuja to rural, where most young Nigerians live. And last, with that being said, to move on to the final segment of our podcast, which is policy at the crossroads. I think this is a very important segment to wrap up today's episode, and that is looking at the policies. For instance, artificial intelligence offers Nigerians both an opportunity and a warning. The opportunity is clear: higher agricultural yields, smarter fintech services, and new pathways for youth unemployment. The warning, however, is just as stark. Without inclusive policy, AI could sort of amplify inequality. It could also enrich elites, and it could also leave a million sidelines. So therefore, Nigeria's central bank and government therefore could face a critical choice, and the trade-off is one that will shape not only the country's trajectory, but also, I would say, set the tone for Africa's digital future. The case for taxing AI super profits is one that I would actually like to mention first. One policy option is to treat the AI driven profits much like the resource rents from oil. Just as Nigeria has sought to capture a share of petroleum revenues for public spending, it could design mechanisms to tax AI super profits and the extraordinary gains reaped by corporations that leverage algorithms to dominate the markets. Is basically what AI super profit is. For example, large agribusinesses that deploy AI for precision farming could see yields rise by 20 to 30%, while fintech giants might boost margins by cutting costs with machine learning. And without intervention, these profit will flow upward, reinforcing Nigeria's pattern of wealth concentration. But with targeted taxation, the state could reinvest these gains in education, digital literacy, and reskilling programs, ensuring ordinary Nigerians share in the dividends of technological change. Economically, this reflects the principle of Pigouvian taxation that we learned in DP1, which is using taxes to correct for market distortions and, more importantly, the case for inequality exacerbated by wealth distribution. The counter argument for this that I actually noted down was that critics warn that taxing AI too heavily stifles innovation and drives capital away, and this is actually true. When governments tax companies, they what the companies usually do is firstly they lay off workers, and the reason for that is because wages uh, under the neoclassical model, wages are not sticky, so it's very easy to get rid of the workers. And next, what they do is they like sort of try to reduce supply or like try to produce less, and this sort of stifles innovation. For example, in the U.S. Recently, some policies have been made to deter this by giving tax cuts to businesses, and it actually incentivizes businesses to sort of expand more as they're not charged with giving away a significant portion of their revenue, and economists actually prefer that way. And Nigeria could, and the counter argument for taxing the AI superpowers in Nigeria is it would deter intervention. Flutterwave, for instance, has raised over 1 billion in funding. So if investors fear taxation, they may divert capital to Kenya, South Africa, or even outside Africa altogether, where taxes are less. So for policymakers, the challenge is to strike a balance, capture some of the rents to fund inclusive growth without undermining the entrepreneurial ecosystem that has put Lagos on the global tech map. Education, additionally, no matter the tax debate, all sides agree that education and training are central. Nigeria spends just 7% on GDP on education, which is far below the UN's recommended for 15 or 20%. With over 10 million children out of school, the country is ill prepared for an AI driven labor market. Redirecting revenues, whether from AI taxation, digital levies, or public private partnerships into coding boot camps, STEM education, and vocational training is essential. And this is not only economic necessity, but a social one. A failure to equip Nigerian youth with relevant skills risks a surge in frustration and unrest. Economists call this, and I think the textbook definition for this is skills mismatch trap, where the education system fails to supply workers who match industry needs. Unemployment persists even in a growing economy. So Nigeria must avoid this trap by aligning its education system with the demands of digital Africa. And additionally, there is a broader lesson for Africa. Nigeria's choices will not happen in isolation. As Africa's largest economy and the most populous country, Nigeria often sets the tone for the region. If it manages to balance innovation with inclusivity, other nations from Ghana to Ethiopia may follow suit. Conversely, if AI deepens Nigeria's inequality, it could reinforce skepticism across the continent about the promises of digital transformation. There is also a geopolitical dimension, and this often goes hand in hand with economics. With global superpowers competing for influence in digital economy, mainly China through Huawei, the US through cloud providers, and the EU via regulatory models, Nigeria's policy stand will send signals about which path African economists will take. Will Nigeria opt for like the state-guided digital development, or will it embrace a laissez-faire model where corporations dominate unchecked? So therefore, I would say personally, from my opinion, policy at crossroads is not just a metaphor. It's a policy at crossroads is much more than that. I would say personally for me, it is Nigeria's reality. Taxing AI super profits to reinvest in human capital could turn technology into a tool for shared progress. However, allowing corporations to capture the lion's share of gains repeats mistaking the oil era, where wealth for a few, stagnation for the many. So, with that being said, this is for Mr. Supri Nagela, Mr. Zoran Rahman, or Mr. Shazib Karim. Would you guys agree that taxing AI super profits is actually beneficial for the Nigerian economy, as they could use the fund to increase growth? However, it also has a trade-off of stifling innovation. I see Mr. Supri Nagala, your hand is raised. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before I answer your question, when you connected the words taxation and AI in the same sentence, my mind blew up with an amazing idea. Because let's just think beyond the usual debates on taxes on AI, taxes on big tech, taxes on companies. Because most people talk about either cutting taxes for startups or giving incentives for youth employment. But what about a concept that's rarely explored? the concept of AI driven performance based taxation. So imagine this: instead of a fixed one size fits all tax system, the Nigerian government could use AI algorithms itself to track real time business performance, productivity, social impact, and even profit. And even youth employment numbers, including AI tech giants. And this would also mean that taxes would adjust automatically based on measurable contributions to the economy. Because let's say a small agri tech startup hires young farmers and then reduces food waste through smart logistics or improves market supply chains. This could mean they should pay lower taxes automatically. But then let's say there's another big AI tech company, a profitable company that doesn't create jobs, all outsourced, or contribute to stabilizing prices. They should probably pay the normal rate or even an increased rate if they're negatively impacting the economy. So think about the possibilities, because this system could incentivize youth employment in productive sectors like agriculture, logistics, fintech, and tech-enabled microfinance. Because if by employing young uh, youth, the companies are asked to pay fewer taxes, and that's an incentive all on its own. And then we also know that taxation would then become not just a revenue tool, but a strategic lever to shape the economy, rewarding innovation and social impact rather than punishing growth, like you also underscored and underlined, Arib. And then my big question is, could Nigeria realistically implement this? Infrastructure and reliable data and ensuring no data leaks are definitely challenges. And even uh, piloting in sectors like agriculture or fintech could show how algorithmic taxes could empower youth, reduce inflation, and transform the way we think about government revenue. But I also think there are uh, two other interesting ways AI could also be used with subsidies and investment accounts. Because, first of all, we could use AI to dynamically allocate government subsidies like fertilizer, fuel, or electricity only to programs or businesses that demonstrate measurable impact on food prices, youth employment, or production efficiency. And why is this unique? Because instead of blanketing subsidies that often leak or create inefficiency and cause too much intervention, AI could ensure that every naira is targeted to reduce inflation and create real opportunities. And we have also talked about microfinance earlier, and I also believe AI could also use and be used to make algorithmic inflation heat maps, because AI could soon map real time price changes across Nigerian markets, detect hotspots of rapid inflation, and automatically recommend tax breaks, microloans, or even targeted subsidies to businesses in those areas. So, Zoran, Zoran Rahman, I have a question for you. Do you personally think, sorry, I haven't even answered Arib's main question, which was taxing the AI super profits. So before I share my opinion, Zoran, what do you think about taxing AI super profits?
Oh, sorry, I forgot my mic was muted. So wait, do you want me to answer first or should you?
You for sure. You're the guest speaker.
Okay, so I think I think that like taxing AI like super profits can make a lot of sense, especially for like a country like Nigeria. But there should be like some concerns, and like it needs to be careful to like balance revenue generation and innovation incentives and fairness. Like to get to the short and skinny of it, AI can like amplify productivity, making companies like uh, allowing companies to make high profits with less labor. So, additionally, without taxation, wealth may concentrate in a few tech firms, worsening inequality. And in Nigeria's case, Nigeria could use taxes on AI super profits to fund, well, as I said, youth training programs for like AI and STEM, rural digital infrastructure, social programs to fight unemployment and inflation. However, however, delving into the considerations, there are some. Oh, aside, like delving into the risks of it all. Well, there's obviously capital flight, like multinationals might shift profits abroad to avoid taxes. And obviously, you brought up like the complexity as Nigeria is not exactly, only 39% has access to technology. So tracking AI profits and separating them might be a little advanced for them to just pick up over a training program, additionally, while doing that efficiently. And also, um, Nigeria needs a robust tax administration and international operation, but there are other like benefits to it, like overlooking like this, like what, like somewhat concern, and obviously those could be like digital service tax, like generated from AI platforms serving Nigerian customers, or using like if AI uses Nigerian data or workforce, small royalty can support local development, and reinvestment incentives offer like taxes for AI firms that like that reinvest profits in Nigerian education. So bottom line, what I believe is yes, taxing AI super profits can help fund sustainable opportunities like fighting inequality, supporting policies that could benefit youth, but it must be balanced, well defined, and internationally coordinated to like avoid stifling innovation.
Okay, so Zoran, what an insightful uh, answer by you. So I was also on the same lines as you, and I personally believe that Nigeria is such a populous country. I believe it might be the most populous country in Africa, unless I'm mistaken. But as a result, even if you tax the companies at a relatively higher rate, the companies will not really leave because they will burn. I mean, they will absorb the impact because they know how numbers can change the game. And also, on one hand, these companies would also be generating enormous value, often extracting profits while paying minimal local taxes. And I also believe that heavy taxation could bring in significant government revenue for these international companies. And you could also add in incentives like building data centers in the country or anything like this, or to that would lead to tax cuts and tax breaks. And in addition, I also believe that heavy taxation could fund social programs, infrastructure, and subsidies that could further reduce inflation. But again, this would mean that the government should not be corrupt. But here's the flip side: AI is not just another industry, it's a productivity multiplier. It helps farmers predict crop yields and so many other things, as we've already discussed. And I also at the same time believe that overtaxing big AI firms could stifle local AI adoption and slow down innovation. And this would also reduce interest from foreign companies, foreign tech giants into the country. So, what I personally believe is that taxes should be higher in general than typical taxes. Taxes could be higher for these tech companies in comparison to these other African nations, because the population is so high in Nigeria. So the companies still have an incentive to be there. But at the same time, I believe that taxes shouldn't be so high, like 40-50%, where the company is literally making too little money and would eventually cause losses. So I believe there needs to be a good balance where taxes are higher in general, but uh, but also not too high. So Arib, I hope our discussions were fruitful as well. And what do you think on this?
Thank you, Mr. Subiragala, Mr. Zohran Rahman, for those very insightful remarks. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And as I've said before, policy at crossroads is not just a metaphor; it is Nigeria's reality. And taxing is, if we were to talk about taxes, we could like talk about it for days, as it's a very contentious and divisive topic. However, I would say, as you guys have mentioned, I agree that there is a trade-off involved. On one hand, the money that they could, the tax allocated money could be used to, like could the government could use to like increase growth in AI. However, it comes at the risk of stifling innovation. And personally, given Nigeria's track record, I don't think the government, and this is politically based on the political scene there, as well as based on UN reports, the government has failed to often allocate the tax money to fruitful purposes or growth purposes, as a large chunk of it is often, as mentioned, lost to bureaucratic processes. As a result, I would say AI taxing is actually worse, as you're not only stifling innovation but also the growth that the government is supposed to like put in the AI sector actually does not happen. So in the coming decade, inflation may rise and fall, currencies may weaken or strengthen, but the decision Nigeria makes about how AI will ripple across Africa will ripple for generations. And the question is not whether, in my opinion, whether Nigeria can afford to act. The question is whether whether it can afford not to. So with that, I would say, to wrap up today's episode, to conclude, I would say Nigeria's story is far bigger than inflation charts, coding boot camps, or drones flying over cassava fields. It is about whether a nation with 220 million people, 60% of them under 25, can channel technology into opportunity instead of exclusion. AI offers Nigeria a chance to tame inflation by stabilizing food chains, reduce waste through smarter logistics, and expand financial inclusion via fintech. However, it could push the country's production possibility frontier outward, fueling growth that benefits millions. But left unchecked, it could also displace entry-level jobs, widen economy, and displace and replicate the mistakes of oil economy, where wealth concentrated in the top while masses struggled. The crossroads is clear: invest in education, regulate responsibility, and share AI's dividends, or risk letting elites and foreign corporations capture the gains. And the choice for Nigeria makes it. What the choice Nigeria makes will echo far beyond Abuja and Lagos. It will ripple across digital economy, shaping how a continent engages with technologies of the future. As for listeners, we are left with the central question: will AI become Nigeria's tool for resilience or another chapter in inequality? And the answer won't be found in algorithms alone. It will be written in policy, politics, and above all, in the hands of Nigeria's youth. So, with that being said, is there any final words that our guest speaker today, Mr. Zohran Rahman, would you like to say any final concluding words before we depart for today?
No, Mr. Arif Malik, I believe you covered it all. It was like an honor to be here, and I feel like I was able to take a lot from like how the utilization of AI and just it. I feel like this helped me grow as an economist.
Thank you, Mr. Zohran Rahman. It was an honor to host you again, and thank you for coming for the second time in Dollar Dialogue. The viewers definitely appreciate your insights, your economic and political insights today as well. So, thank you, viewers, for watching today's episode, which was episode 54. Episode 50. Before we conclude, Mr. Subhi Nagala, would you also like to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you, Zoran, because actually, in our past few videos, we had around 7 to 8 people commenting that they wanted Zoran back on the channel. So thank you so much for your time. And yes, sorry for disturbing your conclusion.
No, no worries, Mr. Chupitaka. Like, yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Thank you, Mr. Zohan Rahman, for coming to our episode today. And thank you, viewers, for watching episode 54, Algorithms versus Inflation, Nigeria's High Stakes AI Gamble. And thank you, Mr. Zohan Rahman, as well. So stay tuned for another episode. So stay tuned for next week with another interesting episode with another very interesting guest speaker. Goodbye for now.